Hi everyone, this lecture is actually needed for Lab 3. So under Lab 3 there will be some worded questions only. They're about special circulations. The two we will be discussing will be the hepatic portal system as well as fetal circulation within an expectant mother. So the hepatic portal system, the main function here is as nutrients from the stomach and the small intestines and large intestines are being absorbed, especially from the small intestines, before those nutrients enter circulation and reach the heart, they need to be purified. They're going to be purified in the liver. So any toxins that may have also been ingested by the person and it too, along with the nutrients, get absorbed, especially via the small intestines. Any toxins along with those nutrients, the toxins need to be purified. The blood flow will pass through the liver, so any toxins will be removed in the liver before that blood reaches the heart. So blood will flow into the liver via the hepatic portal vein. So this here shows the first capillary bed. So this would represent, say, capillaries of the stomach and the intestines, where nutrients as well as any possible toxins may be absorbed. Interestingly enough, the hepatic portal system involves a second capillary bed. And what's unusual is it starts off as deoxygenated blood and exits as deoxygenated blood. Typically, capillary beds you see here where oxygenated blood will enter and then deoxygenated blood will leave the capillaries, but not so for the hepatic portal system. It's unique. You need to know the hepatic portal vein will bring deoxygenated blood to the liver. Within the liver, the toxins will be removed and purified deoxygenated blood will then enter the inferior vena cava and then to the heart. And we do need to know that the hepatic portal vein brings the deoxygenated blood with nutrients as well as any toxins to the liver. The purified deoxygenated blood will leave out the hepatic vein and then enter the inferior vena cava to the heart. This figure here shows the venous circulation from the intestines. We have the superior mesenteric vein. We have also the inferior mesenteric vein and the hepatic portal vein where blood flow is entering the liver. And then we have the hepatic vein where purified blood will leave out the liver. So again, I had mentioned there are two capillary beds within the venous system. The first capillary bed would be from the stomach and the intestinal capillaries. Nutrients and toxins would be absorbed here. They'll drain into the hepatic portal vein. Within the liver, the capillaries of the liver, or the liver sinusoids, nutrients will be absorbed, toxins will be removed from the blood. The purified blood, the purified deoxygenated blood, you need to know leaves out the hepatic vein, enters the inferior vena cava, and now it can circulate through the heart, no problem, because it's been purified. Please know before the liver, deoxygenated blood enters via the hepatic portal vein into the liver. The purified blood leaves out the liver, out the hepatic vein, into the inferior vena cava and heart. With regards to fetal circulation, so now a separate lecture, separate from the hepatic portal system. That was one concept. Here's another concept we're going to discuss. Blood flow within the fetus. So all nutrients are obtained from the mother's placenta to the baby. So the placenta, it's along the uterine wall of the mother. The nutrients will enter the baby via the umbilical cord. All nutrients, all the oxygen, it's from the mother's blood via the placenta, via the umbilical cord to the developing baby, the fetus. The umbilical cord, which you can see here, is a 3-vessel cord. There will be one umbilical vein. So you can see here this one large umbilical vein in red. It's carrying oxygenated blood. So it's a vein bringing blood to the baby's heart. The blood to the baby's heart is oxygenated, hence the red color. So the one umbilical vein is O2 rich. The deoxygenated blood, mostly O2 poor blood, will leave out the two umbilical arteries, go back to the placenta for gas exchange. So one O2-rich umbilical vein, two O2-poor umbilical arteries going away from the baby's heart to the placenta for gas exchange. So the one umbilical vein carrying a high concentration of oxygen will leave the placenta, head toward the baby's heart. Once it reaches the baby's heart, it will actually enter the right atrium. You do need to know that most oxygenated blood will enter the fetal right atrium. Quite atypical when it comes to blood flow within an actual human that is born separate from their mother. In us, oxygenated blood enters the left atrium. In a fetal heart, the most oxygenated blood will enter the right atrium first. We will also discuss these special openings, these special shunts in fetal circulation. They're called the ductus venosus, foramen ovale, and ductus arteriosus that we'll get into in the next slide. So these special shunts, these special openings, the first one is called the ductus venosus. The ductus venosus is found in the liver. As I mentioned, all nutrients, all oxygen, all the functions the baby needs, it's provided by its mother. So the developing fetus does not use its own liver to detoxify the blood. It uses its mother's liver. So fetal circulation will bypass the baby's liver, since the function of detoxification is done by the mother. The passageway to bypass the liver is called the ductus venosus. So it's a shunt, a bypass, it's a detour bypassing the baby's liver and entering the inferior vena cava. Once the oxygenated blood from the umbilical vein bypasses the fetal liver via the opening called the ductus venosus, that blood, notice it's going to mix a little bit here with deoxygenated blood from the inferior vena cava, and it's going to enter the right atrium. Interestingly enough, besides it being unique that we have oxygenated blood within the right atrium, there's also an opening here in the middle of the heart, the upper middle of the heart. The opening is between the two atria. This is just in a fetal heart. So in a fetal heart, blood will enter the right atrium first, not go down to the ventricle. It's going to go across into the left atrium via another shunt and another opening called the foramen ovale. So the foramen ovale, it's an opening in the interatrial septum, meaning an opening between the two atria, and blood will flow from the right atrium into the left atrium. Then the O2, the oxygenated blood, will go down the left ventricle, out the aorta to the baby's body and provide oxygen within the developing fetus. So the developing fetus receives oxygenated blood within its tissues. Deoxygenated blood will collect in the superior vena cava and also enter the right atrium. Now it's going to follow an area of least resistance. It's going to go down from the right atrium into the right ventricle. Out the right ventricle, you would think it would travel to the lungs to pick up oxygen, but again, the fetal lungs, just like the fetal liver, do not function because its oxygen and detoxification are provided by the mother. So we're going to bypass the fetal lungs because oxygen, again, came from the mother via the placenta and the umbilical vein. So now deoxygenated blood will enter the superior vena cava, enter the right atrium, enter the right ventricle. We will bypass the lungs by another shunt, another detour called the ductus arteriosus. You can see here that small little vessel there, the ductus arteriosus, that's connecting the pulmonary trunk to the aorta. So that small little vessel connecting the pulmonary trunk to the aorta will then push the blood not to the lungs but into the aorta via this special opening called the ductus arteriosus. Blood will enter the aorta, bypass the lungs. Eventually, the blood will enter these two umbilical arteries that we see here in pink. The two umbilical arteries have some oxygen, some it's what we call mixed or low oxygenated blood. There's a little bit of oxygen here and a little bit of carbon dioxide, so we refer to it as a mixed or low oxygenated blood in the two umbilical arteries. They'll go back to the placenta again for gas exchange. So the newborn is born, the baby is born. It's going to take its first deep breaths. The umbilical cord will be clamped. Blood flow will increase in the baby's lungs and liver, so now the lungs and liver will start to function, and the shunts will close. Those 3 special shunts will close. It turns out the umbilical vein will be called the ligamentum teres, or round ligament. It will close and turn into the ligamentum teres, or the round ligament. The ductus venosus will become the ligamentum venosum. Again, that was the bypass for the liver. The foramen ovale, which connected the 2 atria, that hole, that opening closes and becomes the fossa ovalis, which must fuse shut and become solid at 1 year. The fossa ovalis, if you look here, you can see that little depression in the end of the fossa ovalis. You do need to know that. The fossa ovalis, it's a slight depression within the right atrium. That is the remnant of the foramen ovale. So the foramen ovale was the opening in the fetal heart. Once the baby takes its first deep breaths, muscles around the foramen ovale will enlarge and flaps will shut, and it turns into the fossa ovalis, which is fused and shut at around 1 year of age completely. The ductus arteriosus, that was the bypass of the baby's lungs, that closes and becomes the ligamentum arteriosum, which you can see here. So now the blood flow will leave the baby's heart and go to the lungs to receive oxygen. The umbilical arteries will also turn into what we call umbilical ligaments. Please know the before and after with regards to the shunts. Understand fetal circulation is quite different from newborn circulation, and please understand the differences. Newborn circulation, you can see here what was the ductus arteriosus becomes the ligamentum arteriosum. What was the opening between the 2 atria, the foramen ovale, is now closed, and it's called the fossa ovalis, a depression seen in the right atrium. The bypass to bypass the fetal liver, what was the ductus venosus, becomes the ligamentum venosum. The fetal umbilical vein becomes the ligamentum teres. The 2 fetal umbilical arteries become what are called umbilical ligaments.